Welcome to Bright Ideas. I'm Jessica Duemig, and I'll be the host. I'm here today with Bill Graff. Bill and I go way back. We love the reconnection. But hi, Bill.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Great to see you.
Same. I love that we were able to reconnect and talk again about you being on Bright Ideas. I love having people that I've worked with in the past and then who have, we're two roads diverged in a wood at this point
Right.
from where we met. And we met back in our days at BN Sports, which
Hmm.
was a international, they're not going to like me saying this, but an international soccer network, among other things, of course.
Hmm.
And you were there, you were in charge of content procurement, yes?
Correct. Content acquisitions, they called it.
Acquisitions, nice.
And yeah, I was brought in 2017 to help out with content acquisitions. My background is in programming. I've worked for
Yeah,
uh,
take us through your bio. You've done some
so
really cool stuff.
Yeah, it is, looking back, I've been very fortunate. I've worked with great people. I've had great mentors at each stage, at each critical stage of my career, which definitely helped set the bar for reaching the next stage. And, and it all started really in the mailroom at ABC network in New York, where I ended up after a bitter disappointment with a brief career in film production. And had worked in film production, wanted to be a director, but just about every director I met in New York in film production was either divorced, on drugs, or both. And I thought, that's just not a lifestyle I aspire to in 10 or 15 years when I was in my early 20s. So uh, pivoted just to get a job and, ended up working in audience relations at ABC from the mailroom, and learned how people relate to TV. And that, I think, was the key thing. We would get cards and letters and phone calls from viewers who had questions about the programming or complaints about it. And or if we killed off a soap opera star, I would be a grief counselor for a week. And so it really taught me a lot about that. Went into research then, and into sales research at one of the firms that represented TV stations from all across the country. So if you have a TV station in St. Louis, for instance, and you want to sell time to auto agencies in Detroit, you really can't afford to have a salesperson in Detroit. So you hire an agency that has salespeople to sell your time in all the major advertising centers around the country. But they need the research to show them why their station's better to buy than the other stations. And so this was back when broadcast had probably a 70% share of all viewership, and cable had 30%. And so it was very fragmented. And so, broadcast was a big deal, and I ended up getting my first broadcast TV job for one of the client stations, and worked for an independent TV station in Seattle, Tacoma. Moved from New York. It was a big move. I had just gotten married. My wife wanted to get out of New York. She didn't realize I'd take her as far out as possible and still be in the continental United States. Uh, and that started, a career as an itinerant hired gun program director for TV stations and later cable networks. I didn't realize it at the time. One thing that I hate doing in life is packing up and moving, and I've had to do it, as it turns out, numerous times, because generally a station that's looking for a head of programming is having a problem. If they're not having a problem, they keep the guy that they have or the lady that they have. And and so you're brought in to solve a problem. And if you do so, which I was fortunate to be able to do in each case, the TV station goes up in value. And the dynamic at the time was sell the TV station, and then the new owner replaces the staff. So you basically work yourself out of a job, which I did 4 or 5 times, ended up back in New York at WPIX, which was great. It was the time when the Yankees were winning the American League pennant pretty regularly in the World Series every once in a while. And Seinfeld had just gone into syndication, and the station had both of those properties. So as a result, and as a result of brilliant leadership above me and brilliant people that I worked with, we regularly beat CBS and Fox in the ratings at that time, and it was just great being at a dominant station in the #1 market in the country, and being able to participate in the media world at that time. But I could see the handwriting on the wall. The pace of change in this business keeps accelerating. And it was really picking up in the late 90s. Cable was really eating broadcast's lunch in many ways. I mean, I'll never forget the time when I was working in Charlotte at a dominant independent station, and USA Network, which had, we didn't have much presence really. Cable was still 35% maybe penetration. And USA Network had just bought 2 sitcoms, Wings and Major Dad, that had been running on NBC. Not the most successful sitcoms. The really successful ones went directly into broadcast syndication. So Cosby, Who's the Boss, Seinfeld, Friends, they all went directly into broadcast syndication, made hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. These were shows that were not deemed, strong enough. And so they sold to cable for a lot less money. But USA Network, in their wisdom, bought time on the sitcom blocks of all the major independent channels in the top 50 markets around the country. So they got sitcom viewers where they were, from 7 to 8 p.m. On weeknights in shows like Cheers or MASH or whatever was running at the time. And I'll never forget the creative. The creative was, hey, if you're looking for real comedy, come over to USA Network and watch Wings and Major Dad. So basically telling the viewer, you're wasting your time over here, and come to us. We have fresh stuff for you. And I went to my boss and I said, this is like the quote from Vladimir Lenin, that capitalists will sell us the rope that we're going to use to hang them with. We're selling cable the rope they're going to use to hang us with. He said, well, and my boss at the time was a 60-plus-year-old white, well-off gentleman, let us say, in the upper echelon of income. Our target audience were working class men, 18 to 49. Well, I wouldn't watch either of those shows. And because I wanted to keep my job, I didn't say, yeah, but we ain't targeted at you. So we ended up selling the time, of course, because that was the most important thing. You're not going to extend in the way of income. And short-term decision-making ended up, this was a microcosm for why the short-term decision-making of the broadcast industry led to the long-term success of the cable industry at broadcast's expense, because they had no problem, hey, give us the money, we'll advertise you, we'll integrate you, and in many cases, broadcast networks ended up buying cable networks and integrating with them. And so, it became a whole synergy. Now, of course, both are heading toward less relevance, shall we say, not irrelevant, but one conversation you never hear in a household where the homeowners or the heads of household are under the age of 50 is, hey, honey, what do you say we subscribe to cable tomorrow? Nobody under 50 subscribe to cable. The only people really who subscribe to cable are legacy subscribers. I happen to live in a place where cable is provided as part of your homeowner association services. So I'm
with your
paying
Wi-Fi
extra for it. So I've got it. But
Yeah.
if I didn't have it, I probably wouldn't, because it's easy to replace nowadays, as long as you can get your local channels, through a cable antenna.
And what's interesting too, I mean, it's the convergence of the market, right? It's kind of become one and the same. I'm sitting here, as you say, broadcast, cable, and then we continue to matriculate into streaming, and, there's fragmented, and then it's back converged. I mean, we had Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, Hulu, all separate. And now here they are back together again. So really, it's the whole concept of, oh, get broadcast and cable. Okay, now you get one thing and you have both. Oh, now get all these streaming platforms. Now you have 5 things. Oh, wait, it'd be smarter if we just bundle these together. And now you're back together. I'm sitting here thinking, though, how many people even understand the difference between broadcast, cable, streaming? Because really, when I was growing up, cable was anything over and above ABC, NBC, CBS, maybe Fox, in my brain. Not that that was necessarily correct, but that was the understanding of it. Like, I had very few friends, and I grew up in a upper middle class at the bare minimum area. I mean, everyone had at least cable. Like, it was almost like your landline phone, your cable,
the triple play,
right? Yes. Dial the one. New area codes were popping up in South Florida. What a crazy concept. And so now I think about it, and it's funny how you say, even you said bought time. That's buying commercial time, right? Like, people outside the industry maybe don't understand that that's the same thing. And I think about it, even kind of translating it future to now, the concepts haven't changed. You look at TikTok integrating with Instagram, Facebook, all of that, and yet TikTok is trying to pull those users, right? And it's the same concept. You're not going to get rid of your broadcast. You're not even going to get rid of your cable necessarily until you're now streaming. I mean, look at how anything like Disney Plus or Paramount Plus or Stars or HBO Max, whatever, are advertising on cable, network, whatever. And it's the same thing you just said. And so over time, I mean, the course of your career to now, you've seen this multiple times.
Yeah, it's TV continually reinvents itself. And that's the thing, it's all TV, especially because we're finding more and more that people that were initially watching streaming services like YouTube on other devices are now spending way more time watching it on YouTube on TV. Now that YouTube is more long form, and also I think because of YouTube's really sophisticated algorithm, that once it figures out the things that you like, it just keeps giving them to you. And so, when I'm working in my home office, if I'm just, checking emails and whatever, I'm not on a conversation or a conference call or anything, I'll have YouTube on in the background. It'll have music or something, or a concert, or it's something I don't have to pay attention to, but it gives me background. And I think a lot of people have, moved to assimilating that, especially because of the sea change in the culture that COVID represented. And everyone really had to change the way they worked, priorities, imperatives, what it is that motivates you, what it is that makes you happy. You could actually sort of concentrate on what might make me happy or might not, because I'm in an environment with a lot less inputs going on. I don't have a bunch of coworkers around. I don't have this and that happening. I'm more concentrating on my own work and thinking, you know what? If I don't want to look at that picture, let me get something else to look at in the background. Let me do this, let me do that. And I can do that. I can control my own environment. So people have gotten much more involved in their own self-care, their own work environment and work-life quality, and been able to control that. And I think it makes, in some ways, for more effective workers. In other ways, without having physical community on an ongoing basis, younger workers are really losing out. And that's what worries me the most, because having that interchange, and you can do it certainly, you know, via Zoom and other teleconferencing and whatever, but it's not the same as being in an environment where you run into people and, hey,
Right.
what about this? Or you can toss off that idea, or you're having a conversation about something else and it triggers an idea about what it is
Yeah.
that's going on. And I always found, because, you know, after I worked at WPIX right around the turn of the century, when broadcasting was really starting to get boring because of regulatory changes that allowed companies to own way more TV stations than they were initially allowed to own. So instead of decisions being made at the TV station level, this is another one of the reasons why broadcast has gone into the dumps, in terms of the amount of time people spend watching, or certainly people under 70 spend watching broadcast TV, is because the decisions were being made at the corporate level. You know, rather than buying the movie package or the sitcom that worked great for that particular market because of the tastes of that market, they bought the deal that made the most sense for the most of their 80 channels that they had, that they did
Right.
a deal for, or for the 20 channels that were in the top 50 markets, and the rest of them can go to hell because what do we care about them? Or they're just not as big a priority. Let's put it that way. It's not they didn't care about them, but you know, the
Right.
top ones are the ones that they have to. And so less and less of community desires were being reflected back to the community from the local stations, and they were more and more homogenized, which led people to find other sources. And when you can find a cable channel that, you know, just runs sports, and hey, I love sports, and the quality of the sports is going from, you know, Australian rules football in 1990 to the NBA in 2000, you
Right.
know, now you have a reason to subscribe to this.
Well, and we're also talking about, I mean, you're talking early 2000s, you're talking the genesis of satellite TV, right? You're
Uh-huh.
talking about the introduction of TiVo and DVR, where appointment viewing goes out the window. You didn't have to be, I remember coming home from middle school or high school, and I had to be home by 4:30 so I could watch TRL. Like,
Hmm.
so that I had something the next day to talk about at the water cooler, so to speak. And all
Sure.
my friends did it. And that's what we talked about. And you were kind of weird if you missed it, unless you had a
Hmm.
good reason, like sports practice or something. And that went away effectively, you know, with DVR, or what has ultimately become DVR as we know it today. I mean, it
Right.
used to be you could record one show while you were watching another, and then it was
Hmm.
two, and then it was unlimited. And now here we are where I don't even know what day all my shows are on because
Right.
they're on whenever I want them. And we're not even talking about literally on demand. We're talking about I made the conscious decision to record those shows, not now I'm going to sit for a week and binge watch Gossip Girl, you know, like
Right. Right.
it's insane. And so the flip side of that is all these investments, and correct me if I'm wrong here or misinterpreting it, these investments that all these conglomerates made into these smaller TV stations or bigger TV stations and cable and the mixture and the convergence and whatever we want to talk about, commercial time goes away when you're flipping through the commercials. So talk us through a little bit about, and we're going to get back because we're only like halfway through your career at this point in your bio, but talk to us about how TV stations, and really even nowadays where a lot of it's on demand, how are they making their money? What's
Hmm.
making the economics work for these guys who are investing or thought they were? And then it's like, oh shit, here's DVR.
Right. Right. Well, a lot of it is what I call the emperor's new clothes, which is it's a fiction that everyone agrees to believe. And as long as we all believe it and we all spend money on it, that it exists and no one will question it. And that fiction is Nielsen estimates. So everyone makes believe that Nielsen estimates are true.
Right.
And you know, the thing is, when you look at Nielsen, the margin of error, I don't remember what it is. I don't know what it is today, but I remember the margin of error used to be like 0.5% or something, which when stations were getting 12 ratings, 13 ratings, it really didn't matter. So you had 11.5 or a 12.5. But when you're getting a 0.7, and the margin of error is 0.5, well, are you getting a 0.2 or, you're talking 70% of your number one way or the other
Right.
so the numbers are so small that they're falling within the margin of error in many cases. And so really can't be believed, but people still believe them and people still spend money on it. And and they don't talk about how people fast forward through the DVR. I mean, I remember even VCRs, taping. You could set your VCR, you could time it so it record a particular channel at a particular time, and you could watch it later and fast forward through the commercials. So one school of thought is that even when you're fast forwarding through commercials, you're still seeing the brand. They're structured so at least you get that. And so there's credit that's given and there are dollars that are spent. The interesting thing is it's still being done on the old ad agency timetable. It's being done quarterly.
Yeah.
So the stations don't get paid until a quarter. And anyone who's sharing revenue with them then doesn't even get paid until 30 or 60 days after that. So
Right.
as fast as everything has moved, the one thing that has not moved is the movement of the money. The money is still being held, and so it's an interesting dynamic. But going back to what you were saying about how we have all these different services now, I think the key problem from a viewer standpoint is there's no unified navigation system.
Mhm.
And that's what there used to be when you had just cable, you had one cable system or satellite system. And so everything was on one remote. Now you have to continually go in and out of apps.
Right.
And there's no way to navigate. There's no way to go from an app to a universal channel listing or whatever and navigate through that, and it automatically takes you to the other app.
Right.
There are services that are headed toward that. For instance, I have an app called Just Watch. Have you've heard of that?
Heard of it. Yeah.
It's great because you can type in the name of any movie or TV show and it'll tell you who's got the license for it right now in
Nice.
your
I
region.
have heard of that one. Yeah.
And you can literally subscribe to it or link to it or whatever. But it's not a navigation app.
Right.
It's not something that then you can go, watch immediately. You still have to go out of it and go into wherever you are. So the ease, I think that's really where the big innovation is going to be coming, is from ease of navigation. Somebody who can come up with a killer app that gives people a generational leap in navigation is going to be something that fulfills a need, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. And I mean, I run through this all the time because I think the big piece that many people who aren't in the industry, be it advertising or TV production or any of the affiliated ones, is to your point about how a lot of these big conglomerates bought a lot of different TV stations. There's a lot that's on the same parent company, right? But we know it as this one, that one, the next one, and they do it on purpose, obviously, right? If Paramount Plus isn't for you, make sure you get this one, that's a different plus because you're different, but it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's all targeting, it's algorithms, like you said before. But it's interesting to me, and I'm in this weird generation where I remember what you were talking about, cable TV, then broadcast first, cable, Wings, MASH. I didn't watch MASH, I didn't like it. But Wings I thought was so funny. But now I'm seeing these guys 100 years later on these other network TV shows, which again is crazy. But as you were rattling off some of those names, I was like, oh my God, that's like before everything. You're hard pressed to find that now. If it's even been remastered to actually look good on my TV. But when we look at even the technologies of the hardware has changed. I mean, I have a Google TV because Google runs my life. I have Android phone, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But similar to you, my neighborhood has in my HOA or whatever offers Spectrum, which take it for what you want. But guess what? The Spectrum app doesn't work on a Google TV. It works on a Roku TV. So now I have to get essentially a cable box, a Zumo box, so I can go to that. And then now I'm dealing with two different systems, two different clickers. I'm like, for the love of God, this is insane. Yeah, your face is exactly it. It's like, this is 2025. Did no one tell someone? Like, it's insane. And ironically enough, Roku and Google are both Android. So it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense that it wasn't designed to be format agnostic.
Exactly. And so then you start thinking of the nickel and diming, that they're looking for ways to make money. Pay $5 a month for this stupid box. It's ridiculous. It's insane how it comes together.
And remember, you still have to remember, what is the origin of the whole industry? It's not the entertainment industry, cable. Cable is engineering. It's digging holes in the ground and stringing cables. These are not people that come from an entertainment or customer service background. They don't want to deal with people. They'd rather not in many cases. But that, the corporate culture is one that would rather not deal with people. Of course, they've put on, all kinds of, PR efforts and everything to make themselves, community friendly. And I'm sure they're wonderful now, but you still go back to the core. And we all know they're not that wonderful, actually. So they're just not constitutionally able to say, hey, how do we make this as ubiquitous as possible? How do we ease this for the customer, make it as easy as possible? Well, they'll figure it out. That's their attitude. You just put the grommet into the socket and you do this and blah, blah, blah. And, how come they can't figure that out? There's your disconnect, I think, that we all find when dealing with these type of situations, and you find it also with the wide variation in functionality of the apps. For instance, I was always very impressed with MLB TV, their app. How you can, if a game started an hour and a half ago, you can join it live if you want. You can start it at the beginning and fast forward through any parts that you want to catch up. Or if you tune in after the game is over, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes after the game over, you have a choice of a condensed version of the game, which takes about 11 minutes, or a recap, which is 3 or 4 minutes. Or you could watch the whole game again, over if you want to. And so the whole idea has been, how do we make it as friendly for the baseball fan as possible? And that is something I appreciate tremendously as a customer, because that's always been, as a professional, that's always been my orientation, is how do you build community? How do you find that underserved audience? When you're working, for instance, when you're working for an independent TV channel, you don't have the ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC prime time. You don't have the big news guy at 6 o'clock, that's been in the market for 20 years that everybody follows, or the weather person who is the dominant force in the local market. So you have to figure out what it is that people want to watch that they're not getting from these big channels, and how do you counter program? And so same thing after I left broadcasting and I got recruited to this new entertainment network that Discovery had started called Animal Planet. And my girls and I at the time, the only thing that we watched other than cartoons together was Animal Planet. And so people would ask me, well, why would you leave the number 3 market, the number 3 station in the number 1 market in the country to go work for this little niche cable channel? I said, well, first of all, the niche to me is people that hate animals. And there's a small group of people that don't like animals, don't want to see animals, want nothing to do with animals. Everybody else loves animals of one kind or another. So this is not a niche network. This is a general entertainment network that just happens to be about animals. And let's see what we can do with it. And so that was an incredible amount of fun because Discovery believed tremendously in research, audience research. So we had great demographic information and psychographic information on the Animal Planet viewer and how they over-indexed in almost every aspect of pop cultural consumption. They went to movies more than others. They bought DVDs more than others. They watched more TV than others. They just loved consuming entertainment programming. And so the key became figuring out, okay, what's going to be hot in pop culture and how do we do an animal version of it?
Right.
And so we read, I remember reading about how Fox had bought a format from the UK called Pop Idol, and they were going to do an American version of this. And I thought, I bet that's going to be big. Let's see what we can do. And so I went to the development team and, we talked about it, and they came up with a show called Pet Star. And one of the other advantages we had at Animal Planet was the network way over indexed with Latin American viewers. And so I was always looking for Latin American talent to promote. And there was an out of work former child actor named Mario Lopez who was available from Saved by the
Who?
Bell. I'm sure you remember him.
I do, for many, many reasons.
And so, because we didn't have any kind of budget or anything, a little Animal Planet. And so, but we had enough to afford Mario at the time, and he was great. And we did it for a few years. This show Pet Star, where people would bring on their dog or bird or whatever that would do tricks and, be a competition. We had judges and so on. And it was a lot of fun. We did a psychic show, Pet Psychic, that also very popular for 2 years, and then it was gone. And that was the thing, pop culture, you're hot or you're gone.
Yeah.
John Edwards crossing over was very big at the time.
Oh yeah.
X-Files was very big at the time. So Americans were very into the paranormal. It was a big subject and so we just had plus we had the Crocodile Hunter, who was a big personality. He should rest in peace.
Yeah.
Steve Irwin, who was a big pop culture phenomenon in the early 2000s. And so that was just a lot of fun. And then I had a chance to go over to the international side and build HD networks for Discovery back when HD first started. So that was my second introduction into a new format, first cable. And what do we do, cable versus broadcast? And how do you build a new cable network, when you're on channel 73 or something like that,
Right.
which was Siberia back then. And then this HD thing, and so almost nobody had it, and so we're building a network for almost no viewers. But once again, Discovery to the rescue. What is the psychological profile of the early adopter? Because the early adopter is the one who's going to go out and spend the money for that very expensive new HD set, because it's not, as it hasn't reached mass market pricing yet, and the surround sound. And what does that do? What works in that doesn't work in other things?
Right.
And so we had a lot of fun putting that together and coming up with, once again, there's a business to all of this. It's not just finding the right shows and putting them together and working with your schedulers so they can start to understand it. And that was the key, is always involve the people on your staff in the decision-making process. When I'd never sit down and do an overall schedule strategy by myself or with my number 2 guy, because it was just our perspective. And as much as we knew and as much success as we might have had up to that point, we knew that other voices were needed. And we also knew that it's our responsibility, certainly my responsibility, to develop the staff into where they can take over and build their confidence. And I remember working at Channel 11 in New York, and the general manager loved programming, the guy who I reported to. And he would pour over the movie schedule, and he would basically set the movie schedule. And it was like, it's not your job to, that's but I'm not going to argue with him. And it wasn't that he did a bad job. He really understood how people watch TV. And I learned an incredible amount from him about how people watch TV. But still, he held on to that. And to me, I thought, all right, well, he loves that aspect of the job and he knows enough to hold on to it because it gives him pleasure professionally. I didn't realize how much more pleasure professionally you get when you let someone do it and they come up with a better idea than you could.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal in training your staff. When they come up with something and it puts a light bulb over your head and you go, wow, I never would have thought of that. That's brilliant. Let's take
Yeah.
this and do that. And now we can do, and so that was the goal. And fortunately, that was the result because a number of people that I had the privilege of working with have gone on to, good careers in programming and other parts of the industry. And I like to think that the process that we went through together had a little bit to do with their development professionally and building their confidence to be able to lead teams on their own.
Yeah. How did you address that though? I mean, obviously you're training side by side or whatever them. How'd you let go the first time, right? See, like, all right, you know what? Fly, little birdie, you know?
Well, I it depend. I think it was a particular project, a particular new series, and I asked them, okay, how would you launch this? Because you can't just launch a new series, put it on the schedule and expect people to find it,
Right.
because you ran some promos for it. First of all, no one ever sees your promos. You think they do, but they don't. Maybe once they've seen it 4 or 5 times, then it first sinks in. But there's the rule of three. Nobody
Mhm.
notices any commercial or any promo or any piece of marketing until they've seen it 3 times.
Yeah.
It just doesn't register and in any kind of a significant way. And so um, you have to resist thinking that everyone is watching your channel as much as you are and paying as much
Right.
attention as you are. Virtually no one is. And so be aware that you have to have a lot of frequency. And so what is it that's going to motivate those viewers to watch this new series? Okay, what is it most like that you currently have on the air? Where are those viewers now currently? So
Fish where the fish are.
fish where the fish are. And so you want to schedule it as a lead out to something that is fairly special in and of itself. Why does Fox use, or CBS or NBC, for that matter, ABC, use the Super Bowl to launch their biggest new series of first quarter? Because you've got the biggest audience there. And, they spend, I'm sure, over a year each time deciding what they're going to put after the Super Bowl. It's the
Right.
biggest programming decision they have to make for that quarter, at least, if not for that year.
Sure.
And so, working with the with my schedulers, and I'd say, okay, what can we do to launch this? And they may have come up with an idea of launching it as a marathon, which, depending on what it is, if it's a countdown series, that's a bold thing to do because you're sort of blowing it in the first.
Yeah.
But once again, you realize that the average Animal Planet viewer watches the channel 8 minutes a month.
Wow.
That's it. It's a default channel. It's a channel people turned to during commercial breaks because you could dip in and dip out. You could watch the cute meerkats for 5 minutes
Yeah.
and, go back to whatever else it was you're watching. So sure, there's a lot of people that watch it a lot, but there's a lot of people that just watch it a tiny little bit. And so what do you do to keep them, to try to just get them to watch longer? And, we would have these discussions of how do we increase viewership? Where should we be marketing? Why aren't we getting these viewers to come in? Why aren't we getting those? I said, no, don't look at it that way. That's really hard. That's a heavy lift trying to find viewers who aren't on you to come to you. How
Right.
about keeping the viewers that we have twice as long? If we
Yeah.
do that, we've doubled our ratings.
Yeah.
And so what can we do structurally? What can we do promo wise, to keep people, to put the promo in the first position of the break? It's the most likely position for people to see, or the last position. And so for coming up next. So it just gives people a reason to stay on the set a little bit longer, stay on your channel a little bit longer. And that's the key. You want to become one of the group of seven. People have a group of seven of any category that, you ask people what restaurants they go to. They're not going to name more than seven. You
Yeah.
ask them what channels they watch. They're not going to really name more than seven. What
Right.
apps they view. They're not going to name more than seven, and so on. And so you want to be one of those and
Yeah.
graduate to that. And how do you do that? So it's once again, it's building community out of underserved viewers, people who aren't getting what they want elsewhere, and they realize you get them.
Yeah.
You're their Hallmark channel.
Yeah, it's funny. I call it winning at home, right? Like before you even think about trying to win on the road, you got to win at home where everything's in your favor,
Right.
right? So to your point, keep your people where they already are, fish where the fish are, whatever. But I like the concept of winning at home because it's so universal in a sense of like, why are you going to try to plan how to win in the snow? If you're a team from Florida, right? How are you going to even replicate winning in the snow or keeping your guy warm enough when you can't even do it in your home stadium where all the fans are yours? You control every bit of the audio, the video, the climate, all this. You control everything with your viewers when they're there.
Right.
Right. So keep them there. And then only once you're undefeated at home, have enough of the share that you set out to get of your current viewers, do you then say, all right, we're maxed out. Now we're 8-0. Now, how do we win on the road? Now, where do I go get more visitors from, more viewers, more whatevers? And, it's interesting. One of the things you said, and I think that this could be a huge tech advance when the whoever figures out how to unify the viewing schedule, as you said, is to add directly within the promo, add directly to your watch list. Because there's times where I set my watch list, I say, oh, remind me about this Netflix when this new video comes out or whatever, new broadcast. And it's like, I forgot about it until it's sitting there in my queue. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did want to watch that.
Right.
And now I'm going to go back and watch it. And it's crazy too, when you think about it, back, and it's crazy to think how far it's come, the hockey stick of viewership and apps and everything for us. But spoilers are a bigger deal today than they used to be, right? It's, to your point, you basically blow it on a marathon. That's why you're seeing now Netflix and Prime going a little bit more episodic, a little bit more appointment viewing, where you can't get the whole season of Reacher. You might binge watch 1 through 4. And now you have to wait a week for 5, a week for 6, so that there's no spoilers, so that people aren't screwing it up for everybody else.
Right.
And so it's been interesting to see the evolution of that. But I guess my question for you is, how do you plan for the future? Like, do you just live in the moment in this kind of industry? I mean,
it's you have to have at least 180-degree perspective. 360 is great, but that's being able to see behind you, and that's very difficult. But you really have to be able to see everything that's coming in front of you. That means reading trades. You can't just get all your information from video snippets and things like that. I still subscribe, and it's a free subscription. Anybody can get it, to Daily Variety. And Variety covers the entertainment industry in a very broad way. And, it's movies, TV, concerts, whatever. But it's all about attention. It's the attention economy that we're in. And certain things are going to get people's attention in certain arenas. And are people spending more time in movie theaters? No. But how do we get them to spend more time in movie theaters? And what is it about different apps that make it easier or less easy to negotiate? What's going on in the business world, the business dynamics, and tech and business are totally intertwined, especially since the tech platforms are now dominant in entertainment.
Right.
You know, they can spend way more on sports rights than entertainment companies or studios can. And
Yeah.
so, you know, we're seeing obviously the migration, the beginning of the migration of sports to the Amazons and Netflixes and Apples of the world. And I think that's going to continue. You know, you just have to have your eyes open and see where things are going. And you know, there are just I would say LinkedIn also, you know, is really important to build a network on LinkedIn, and certainly people who contribute regularly on LinkedIn that you can learn from in this business. Folks like Evan Shapiro, you know, and his blog, you know, just a lot of research, a lot of information about the dynamics of where things are headed. And so nobody, you know, is a completely able to predict, but just knowing that the pace of change continues to accelerate and staying on top of it, I think, is the key.
You know, I want to go back, I'm taking some notes here. I want to go back to one of the examples you used earlier in MLB TV and the app there, because I think, you know, sports is one of those where it ebbs and flows with generations, it ebbs and flows with newness, right? I mean, you have everything from, you know, Savannah Bananas to WWE and every iteration of WWE and the different programming there. And I mean, you have football, but then you have the XFL, which has reinvented itself 17 times. But what I love about MLB, right? America's pastime, baseball, this, that, the other. It's the sport every little boy plays. It's the sport, you know, every little boy quits at some point and comes back. Girls now too, of course. What I love about what they're doing, and you brought this up, is the ability to watch the long form, the recap. Because I think too, even if you go to the start over function, you can do a highlight reel up until current.
Yep.
And then watch it in real time.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is because baseball had their highs, they've had some recent very lows. They're reinventing themselves with the consumer in mind, which is very different than what a lot of other sports do. And in my thought as you were going through those was, wow, my dad would totally just start it over and watch it every play in real time. But I would watch the recap and then somebody else might want the 11-minute version. And then the other generation might want the 3-minute version, enough to be aware. But really, I personally don't go back and watch like events that I already know the ending to. You know, it's different with a movie. Like we've all seen Titanic 87 times, whatever. Like also we kind of knew how it ended. But I'm not gonna watch the sport all the way through. Like, good, they won. There's 161 more. But there's chunks of it where it's like you can't miss the torpedo bats the Yankees are playing with. You need to know that, otherwise you're out of the loop and your information's obsolete, right? So I love that they're doing that. And maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Maybe they're not doing it with that in mind, but it's made for the different platforms. It's made for this attention consumption economy that you just referenced of at least we've got them for 3 minutes. And if we get them for 11, awesome. And if we've got them for 2.5 hours, even better. But maybe then, and this is where I think people forget, is I enjoyed it so much in those 11 minutes. Now, if I can get a cheap enough ticket, I'm going to go to the game, right? And then it's this whole, to your point, 180 versus 360 of maybe they'll come back and watch another game on TV, or maybe they'll come to the stadium, right? And granted, that's not necessarily the win for the TV show or the programming partner, but it certainly is for the team. And then the team can invest more here. And then it's a cycle. And people forget how intertwined economics really are, especially the sports industry, where, again, going back to the evolution with DVR and appointment viewing going out, the only thing you're really appointment viewing anymore is sports. And even that, to your point, is ish. Right. I mean, it's been an interesting evolution there.
It has. And you know, two things about MLB TV. First of all, you have an option to hide the spoilers. So
That's right.
when you tune it, which is what I do. So I have no idea what the score is when I turn it on at 11:30 at night and I want to watch the recap. So I can still do it with virgin eyes, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is, you're right. It's how do you capture people? And I would suggest that the next evolution, something, and this is for me as a Juan Soto fan. So I think Juan Soto, greatest ball player of the last.
Brave coming from a Yankee fan.
uh, but
Brave statement right there.
it was from being a Nationals fan, because when
Ah,
I was
okay.
at Discovery living in DC, we didn't have a baseball team until the Nationals came from Montreal. And we fell in love with this, sort of haphazard, ragtag team for a few years until they built themselves up. And then, this guy Juan Soto comes in, along with a lot of other players. They won the World Series. Um, and so I followed him as he's gone to San Diego and then the Yankees last year. And, brings me back to being a Yankee fan when I was at Channel 11. Everything is a cycle. And now he's with the Mets. Well, I'm not a big Mets fan, but I love Juan Soto. So what if MLB just had Juan Soto's at-bats, Shohei Ohtani's at-bats, Mike
Yeah.
Trout's at-bats, Yordan Alvarez's at-bats, and you
Mhm.
just had a 4 minute or 5 minute highlight of their full at-bat of all 3 or 4 or 5 of their at-bats in the game. And
Yeah.
so I would watch that,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
so it's just another way to engage. And to your point, when Shohei Ohtani comes or Yordan Alvarez comes to my hometown to say the Marlins to play, I'm more motivated because he's my guy. I
Yeah.
spend time watching you. I'm a fan. I want to see
Right.
you. Now I get to see you live. You should want to see me because I'm your big fan. And
Yeah.
so there's this whole relationship that gets built through that lens, specifically through that
Man,
lens.
I love that idea. It's like you do this for a living or something. What a concept.
Well, it's all about figuring out how to get people to watch,
Yeah.
and what it is that floats the boat of that community, what it is that
Yeah.
they're not getting that would make them spend more time with you.
Well,
And
and it's so crazy because while you think of it from the programming, my side, and this goes directly to how do we monetize it? And I'm like, I got a sponsor for show me every home run hit yesterday. And I got it for you. It's
Mhm.
Progressive Home Insurance, protect the plate, something. I don't know.
Oh
You can
yeah, sure. There's
whatever.
an organically sensible brand for
Yeah.
every orientation of highlight.
Yeah. Well, and then you think about the applic, and this is where my brain goes, right? And God, for us to brainstorm, I would love it. Just
Mhm.
to think about where this goes with NIL, right?
Mhm.
When we apply it to college, what does that look like? But then you think of it in terms of, Juan Soto maybe is not quote unquote an influencer, so to speak, but
Mhm.
these NIL guys, these and gals in college athletics, they're building it from an influencer model where the number of viewers that they have, da, 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 da. So if you were to show a college baseball every home run and of this one guy, or in softball or gymnastics, or insert one of the 40 sports here, I
Right.
can see that being so, but then again, living on its individual platform, whatever that is, whether it's
But
TikTok
it's
and
still organic with their current social media outreach
exactly.
and profile. And so they can promote it to their followers. Hey, tune in, every an hour after every game, my at-bats are on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh
You
my
know,
God. Could you imagine? I love
so even if
it.
you haven't been able to see the game, you can see me because I'm so special.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to the attention economy,
That's
as you
right.
so aptly put it.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, we're over time, so I want to give you I want to kind of focus back on you a little bit specifically. What projects are you working on now? What is Bill Graff up to these days?
So I'm working at my own company called Telegraph Media. And
Nice. Love the play on words.
thank you. And I'm working to help, it's still the through line of my career, which is, building community from underserved audiences and helping people be able to monetize that through their IP. And so I'm working with a company called Duya Media Group, which has relationships with all of the digital platforms to place live events, sports and music specifically, on fast channels, as well
Okay.
as with a broadcast group. And so broadcasters, for instance, have these time periods between network sports on the weekend and when their weekend news starts. They have an hour and a half to fill or an hour to fill or so. And so this company will take your schedule of events and pitch it to all of these different platforms. And it's done on a revenue share basis.
Okay.
And the rights holder keeps the lion's share of the revenue, the 50-50, the 50% that comes back to Duya Media Group. And they also have a strong VOD component. So if you've got former live events that you have a library of, they can help monetize that. And this is
Okay.
all additive for rights holders. So it's not like, well, unless it's something that you have sold exclusively, obviously, if a platform has an exclusive right to something, they have it exclusively. But anything that you have the rights to that is non-exclusive, they might have interest in. And
Okay.
so it's a tremendous way, especially in this day and age when it's hard for fast channels to, really realize the value of what their IP offers, just based on the advertising that's being sold on their channel, to be able to expand that. It also helps expand your brand. And it expands, going back to your mention of built-in sponsorship and the value of that within sports, which can't be discounted at all. It can't be underestimated. Having signage, ring signage in combat sports, having signage along the route in cycling or whatever, it's just a tremendous subliminal tool that marketers can use, especially if they buy time within the show to complete the loop of selling that. And so if you sold your your brand, branding value based on distribution in 5 million households on your channel or where you've distributed the shows thus far, all of a sudden this could be 10 times that. And they're getting 10
Wow.
times the value because it's now going to be available in 50 million households or 50 million connected devices. And so you've really got a force multiplier here for viewership, revenue, and branding. And
Gotcha.
I just started working with them a couple of months ago, and it's been really gratifying so far. So really enjoy.
And so you're securing the content, you're doing the rev share
I'm
deals?
helping, yeah, I'm helping rights holders. I'm introducing rights holders to the folks at Duya to their evaluation process. And
Got it.
so if based on their evaluation, they feel, yeah, we can help make you a lot of money and make us some money too, then, I'll facilitate the relationship between them.
Very cool. And what type of content are you looking for?
We're looking for live and as live sports. And it can be combat sports, but also emerging sports, which I think are
Okay.
really we've really been going after some emerging sports lately, parkour, for instance,
Interesting.
there's a number out there that really could benefit from the exposure, and
Sure.
so certainly very happy to take a look at what they've got. And it also helps with their library because they can take as live. So even if a rights holder has an exclusive deal with a particular platform for a pay-per-view or SVOD exhibition of their live events, after those rights expire in 48 hours or a week or whatever it is, now they're available as live. Anybody who didn't subscribe hasn't seen it. And
Right.
so, it's new to you. And so there's value there as well.
That's awesome. So how would it, let's say someone who's watching this now has content. Do you want them getting in touch with you? How would they do that?
Sure. They can reach out to me at wgraff@verizon.net.
Okay.
And I'm very happy to talk them through the process and take a look. And the other beauty of it is the materials that you're already producing to support your content in terms of metadata is all that they need. You don't have to create new metadata or new support material in order for DUI to be able to take your content out into the marketplace.
Amazing. Great to know. And I guess, you know, if I were to ask you, what is the most satisfying professional experience you've ever had? Narrow it down for me.
That's a great question. Well, you know, it's funny. There was one, we had a series at Animal Planet called The Future is Wild. And basically they took a bunch of biologists and zoologists and asked them to imagine what life on Earth would look like 10 million years from now, 50 million years from now, if somebody came back and to look at how life evolved. And so, you know, this was before CGI, you know, was any kind of so this were like, you know, I mean, computer generated, but done by hand, really. It was very, and really great looking. And the question was, all right, so how do we schedule something like this? You know, where are people going to want to watch it? And back in the day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day specifically was considered the Death Valley of scheduling, of programming. You never scheduled anything on New Year's Day because you had all the huge bowl games that were playing. So everybody's watching the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl. Well, that might have been true back in the 20th century, but you know, now we've got, what is it, bowl month or something? You know, I mean, it's all diffused.
44 games, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, you really didn't have that formidable block of top college, you know, the ultimate culmination of the college football season on one day. Yet everybody else still treated it like that. So nothing was running. And what are people thinking about on New Year's Day? Well, you're thinking about the future, you know, resolutions, what's going to happen this year, whatever. So it's not that hard to make a connection between the future is wild, and New Year's Day. And so we premiered it New Year's Day. The ad salespeople hated it because it's one of the worst days of the year for ad sales. Nobody's buying time on New Year's Day. But I said, you know what? I can't help it. This is going to, and it turned out to be a huge ratings win for Animal Planet that day. So
amazing. Sometimes you got to go with the gut.
And the rest of the season, you know, played well because we launched it and people got interested in it. And so, you know, off the top of my head, I got to say that was very satisfying and sticks with you. You know, and the whole thing is zigging where everybody else zags. You know, when you're a programmer and you're not the top dog, you got to figure out, once again, where is that underserved audience? How do I find them? How do I give them what they're not getting elsewhere? And then how do I keep them?
Absolutely. Well, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so glad you were able to join me on this. I learn something every time I talk to you, so it's always interesting. And yeah, I'm sure everyone's going to love this. And obviously, comment below. This has been Bright Ideas with Bill Graff, and we'll see you at the next one.
All right, been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Jess. Be well.
Thanks.